Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Geektown Behind The Scenes podcast. I'm your host Dave Elliott, and this week we're diving into the chaotic, fast-talking and brilliantly funny world of The Studio, the Apple TV comedy from Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg that takes us inside the madness of a fictional Hollywood studio. Since its debut, The Studio has become one of Apple's biggest comedy hits, recently renewed for a second season and making Emmy history with a record 23 nominations, the most for any freshman comedy. The series stars Rogen as studio boss Matt Remick, alongside Kathryn Hahn, Kathryn Hahn, Chase Sui Wonders, and a parade of other big-name cameos. Joining me is the hugely experienced George Haddad, supervising sound editor and sound designer whose career spans everything from Hercules and Xena to Gotham and Taylor Sheridan's Landman and a bunch of other Taylor Sheridan shows as well. On The Studio, George and his team have been shaping the sonic world of the show, from the frantic one-shot scenes and episodes to wall-to-wall improvised dialogue to the immersive Atmos mixes that capture everything from the Warner Brothers lot ambience to chaotic Comic-Con crowds. In this episode, George shares how Star Wars first inspired his love of sound, the sheer complexity of editing so much dialogue, why comedy demands a different approach than drama, and how sneaking around the Warner Brothers lot with a microphone landed him with the perfect background audio for the series and got him in a little bit of trouble. He also talks a bit about his time on Gotham and working on various Taylor Sheridan shows, and also what dream projects he'd love to tackle in the future. So sit back and enjoy my chat with George Haddad. Thank you for coming on to chat to me and to talk a little bit about your work and The Studio. Before we get into The Studio itself, do you just want to give a little bit of background about you and how you got into the industry in the first place?
Sure. It was 1977. I went to see a film called Star Wars. Like many, I walked out of there making the lightsaber sounds and doing the Darth Vader breathing sounds. And back then, we didn't know Ben Burt was the sound designer. We all thought John Williams did all those great sounds. And
of course,
I got into music, actually. Started playing drums and percussions and eventually studied music at the Berklee College of Music. And then from there, I actually discovered computer sound design. Started off with the music synthesizer sounds and then migrated it into sound effects. And eventually some alumni friends came out to Los Angeles, called me a year later and said, come on out, try it for a bit. And I did, and got into dialogue editing and sound effects editing and mixing, and now sound supervisor with different crews and stuff like that. So that was the quick version of the journey of how I got into sound and eventually the industry.
Yeah. What was the first sort of big break of a show that you worked on?
When I first arrived in Los Angeles, it was just little jobs here and there, assisting this person, helping this person film their documentary. It was like really low budget or no budget, really, a lot of the times. It was, we needed the experience, or I needed the experience, I should say, and start networking and stuff like that. Because again, this was before internet and or other means of connecting and networking. And then eventually, again, it was an alumni friend from the Berklee College of Music days that introduced me to someone who owned a mom and pop studio at the time. I joined that, and eventually we did some shows called Hercules and Xena back then.
Of course.
Yeah, great followings, great cult followings, big hits on the syndicated network level. And I became a sound effects editor on that show. And it was 12, 15 hours a day to keep up with what was needed to make those shows sound the way they sounded back then. And eventually I started mixing just to change the experience a little bit, and then migrated back into sound editing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a great thing to be involved with. Those shows were wonderful fun.
Yeah.
So how did you end up joining The Studio?
Over the years, being in the union, we get to work at different facilities, whether it's the studios like Warner Brothers or Universal, and even independent studios like the Formosa Group Sound. And there I met a post-production producer named Mandy Price. Eventually, she was hired to do the studio, and she needed a sound crew and wanted to work at Formosa Group Sound. And the timing worked out perfectly. So I was able to join her editing sound for that show with the mix team. And I was lucky enough to to bring a crew that I've worked with for a few years now. So there was that comfort. Even though I worked with Mandy a couple of times before on different shows, it was still a new approach, a new venture to the sound for what eventually became the studio.
Yeah, The Studio is a wonderful show, and it's just so funny and so cringe in places intentionally. I really love it. I love that sort of behind the scenes kind of stuff. And what were the early conversations that you had? Presumably it was with Seth and Evan and the other people involved about the sort of sonic personality of that series.
Yeah, early on it was with Eric Kissack, the picture editor, who worked with Seth and Evan many times before. We got some early cuts of the episode. I did some pre-mixing just to give them an idea of what we could do for certain scenes, especially the first episode. They filmed it in a way where you had no idea this was going to be a comedy or anything. They filmed it as they film. We open up with that kind of setting, and then out of nowhere, we come into reality and we realize that this is just a set they're filming on, and the comedy starts from there. They wanted to obviously focus on the dialogue, what the cast is performing on camera. They wanted to focus on that. But at the same time, this was a show for Apple, which mixes all their series in Atmos. So we introduced some opportunities to spread some sound around a little bit, not intrusive, protecting the dialogue in the middle. But at the same time, you could have some movement, not just in the surrounds, but above you or moving across from one side to the other. So we were subtle at the beginning with that and started introducing it with other opportunities when there was bigger crowds in certain scenes. But the main thing, David, was this was a continuous shot for every scene. And even one episode was a continuous shot for the entire episode. So we were able to introduce some tracking as the camera was moving. We tracked the camera and had sound follow different perspectives. Again, subtle, but we wanted to bring that in just to be a little more immersive and introduce the viewer to some more sounds without getting in the way of the dialogue. So those were the early conversations. We didn't want to hit it hard right off the top and start playing sounds loud in the surrounds or above us or anything like that, just to not to throw them off track or anything like that. But it worked out good early on. And then once Seth and Evan started listening to the mixes, they were all pleased with what we mixed.
Yeah, because as you say, there was one episode which wasn't a complete one shot, but there are a lot of very long unbroken sequences across the entire show. How different is that for you to actually edit for? Because obviously there aren't hard cuts. Does that make a huge difference for you in terms of the sound?
It did for us on this one because the way we wanted to approach it, we knew that we're mixing in Atmos, but this is not going to be a big battle scene or a car chase scene where we could really stack the sounds and move sounds around. This was, again, written for dialogue. But at the same time, there was so much on camera, and our approach is, if you see it, get a sound ready for it, whether it's people talking, people moving, cars driving. So we, as editors, we brought all the sounds to the mix stage in our sessions. And then from there, we would decide what we need to hear, when we need to hear it, how loud to hear it, where can we place it. If there was a lot of dialogue happening, but in the background, you saw big crowds or anything that could make a sound, we shifted it off to the side a little bit, maybe put it in the surrounds. We didn't say, you know what, we're not going to really hear that kind of stuff. Let's not edit it. That's not the way we approached it. We brought everything we saw, a sound for everything that we saw. And then once we're on the mix stage with the music coming in, that's where we make the decisions of what we want to hear, what we should take out. So it was almost like a less is more approach for this scene. But with the one shot episode, there was so much chaos. We had such a great opportunity to fill all the speakers in the Atmos environment.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really interesting way of doing it. You mentioned dialogue being obviously incredibly important in this. How difficult is it to keep that dialogue clarity? Are you taking stuff actually directly from set? Is there a lot of ADR stuff going on? How are you managing all that?
Yeah, for a 30-minute show, this was the most dialogue, editing, and procedures that we had to take. And it was even more than other series that I've done that were 50 and 60 minutes because the continuous shot style of what the series was, as well as you're always seeing 5, 6, 7 characters on camera running around chaos. That was the comedy. We actually had, I think at some point, we had almost 20 tracks of dialogue because we basically had to have 2 tracks for each character because it was one continuous shot got through the scene. And then the next scene, they're right back at us. So we had to checkerboard every character. And when you have 7 or 8 characters in the scene, you double that up. And because of the continuous shot, the boom operator couldn't always capture the dialogue because he had to move out of the way when the camera was chasing or tracking the characters. So that was a lot of work. But the way they filmed this, a lot of it was improvising. So it's not like if one take had an issue of clarity, I could go to another take, see if they said it the same way. In most cases, they didn't because this is comedy. They're changing every scene. So cases like that, we had to really go to our bag of software, whether it was Isotope or in Pro Tools, and really try to clean out the dialogue, make sure clarity was there. If not, then we would talk to Seth and Evan and say, look, do you mind looping this? They weren't big on ADR unless they wanted to add some extra lines for the comedy. But otherwise, they really liked the production, and Buck Robinson, our production sound mixer, and his team did a great job. And we were able to really get away with very minimal ADR unless it was added lines.
That's awesome. And you mentioned not only a lot of characters on screen, they're up there with the West Wing with how much it's how snappy and fast that dialogue is. The script pages must have been enormous for this.
They were. Yeah, for 30 minutes, I'm telling you, it almost felt like we were doing 60 minutes at times.
Yeah. I mean, they pretty compressed 60 minutes worth of dialogue into that. Were there times when you were having issues, like just because of the environment that you're in? Because you're filming there's some sort of mid-century modern homes as well as sort of stuff around the studio and the glass and concrete and sounds can bounce off things. Were the environments themselves causing you issues as well?
A couple of times on the exteriors, especially in Las Vegas, they were filming in an actual casino. They weren't sets, and outside by water fountains during the day with traffic. But these days we're spoiled with some great software to isolate the dialogue, clean out the background noise. So we definitely went to our bag of tricks for scenes like that just to avoid ADR. And for me and my crew, we were lucky in terms of the series actually filmed in Los Angeles. We're based here. So we were able to go out and actually record the environments and the ambiances from those locations that they filmed at, so we could actually use it in the episode. We took whatever production sound we could keep, but when we had the opportunity, we went out with our recording equipment, recorded the stereo versions of the ambiance that we could put into the show and spread out into the Atmos environment of sound mixing. So we were lucky there, and we'll see what happens next season. But the show was filmed in Los Angeles, being based in Los Angeles, that was certainly a big bonus for us.
Yeah, I mean, I am glad it's filming in Los Angeles because they do these things where things are based in Los Angeles and then they're filmed in Vancouver. But with something like the studio, how can you not film it?
Exactly. It needed to be.
Yeah, no, totally. It was the studio itself. Was it Paramount they used for that, or
Apple
was it?
TV.
It was the Apple TV lot, was it?
Oh, no, it was Warner Brothers lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. It was the Warner's lot, was it? I always find it really funny whenever they show a TV studio, 90% of the time, whenever it's a TV studio, they show it in a set show. It's the Paramount lot because it's the prettiest.
Yeah, oddly enough, this one being on the Warner Brothers lot, I've worked there for many years. I was able to get on the lot and record the ambiances there too. I got on a golf cart and taped a few microphones to it and drove around like they did in certain episodes. And we just got lucky that it was just down the street from where we live.
Yeah, that's really handy. In terms of that sort of ambient noise, the background chatter and the sort of set noise, and doing this for a comedy show as opposed to a drama, is there a sort of difference in the type of stuff you're getting and how you mix for a comedy over a drama?
There is, because comedy, to me, it's timing and quantity is the two main aspects for sound. We have to time it around the dialogue because that's the punchline. That's what the viewers are there to hear and see. And we can't play too much sound because we can't distract them. It's like I said earlier, when we get to the mix stage, we have plenty of sound. That's my approach. Give them so much sound, separate all the sounds so they have options, but protect the dialogue. And with quick punchlines and the continuous shooting, tracking the actors, the camera tracking the actors, we really had a subtle approach in so many scenes and there's also music too. The music is driving the movement too. They're running, they're moving fast. The music expresses that. In comedy, we've actually scaled back a little more than we do in a drama where it's a slower pace sometimes. You can actually use sound to accentuate what's happening in a drama, whereas comedy, the line is what's going to make people laugh. Sometimes sound will accompany that if someone's falling, of course, or they need a sound effect to accentuate whatever the dialogue was. But I do find a difference between drama and comedy doing both, that the approach is different for sure.
You talked there about using some of the sounds within the sort of comedy. Were there any particular scenes where the sound played a sort of quite pivotal role in a joke or a payoff on the show? I'm trying to think. It's not coming directly. I'm trying to think if there was anything particular that might stand out.
There were a few moments, and it was based around Seth's character, Matt Remick. The continuous shot episode, it was the second episode, the Oneer, they called it. Mm-hmm. He created so much chaos on the set because of him trying to get his idea to Sarah Polley, the director. And every time he screwed up a shot, we would have the background set people that we re-recorded with loop group voices, just sort of letting them know how frustrated and angry they were that he screwed up the shot so many times. So we would have them just grind their teeth saying their lines, yelling at each other. We got to do it again because of... So we helped tell the story of Matt screwed up the whole scene again. And there was another episode, he was at Comic-Con. He just totally ruined whatever the plan was. And we just had the crowd just give it to him, swearing, cursing, which we don't get to do a lot, but because it's a streamer, we were allowed to. We didn't overdo it, of course, but sounds like that. We basically looked at Seth's character's expression, and we used background voices and sound effects sometimes to really push forward what's happening to his character. What did he do? And then that was really rewarding because sometimes music can't really do that. The crowds and the sound effects came in, and we loved that. We loved those two episodes.
Were there any major points where the sound altered dramatically from maybe what you had originally planned or talked to, so you ended up changing something in the edit to maybe emphasize something else or something like that for any of the episodes?
I think the fact that we kept a close communication line with Eric, picture editor, before the episodes came to us, we established what the episode would sound like beforehand. So once we did get the final version of picture, we were already off and running. There were no surprises. Obviously, when we played back for Seth and the writers and other producers, they may want a few changes, but nothing dramatic. So we were fortunate to get the episodes early on and start building what they wanted in terms of ambiance and sound effects and stuff like that. So that was really a credit to Mandy Price, our post-producer, for giving us a good budget to work with here.
Yeah. Because you mentioned that quite a lot of the dialogue is improvised in places as well. So I imagine there's a sort of script version, but then at least once you've got the early versions of the picture, so you know what they're going with it.
Yeah, definitely. And there was a couple of times, even last second, let's look for an alternate version where he's saying it louder. And I would just go through the sound rolls, just praying, please say it the same way. Please say it the same way. But most times they didn't, just because that's a comedy for you. They improvise.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any sort of sound motifs that carry through the entire show? Because they are in different locations pretty much in every single episode, apart from maybe back and forth to the office. But so is there anything which is tying it together in that sort of way?
I'd say the music certainly carried that sort of their theme across from one episode to the next. In terms of ambiance and sound effects, not really. His car, the office, like you mentioned, those are minimal background sounds that weren't featured. But for sure, the music had that excellent drum feel to it, just driving and pounding. And we got to really look forward to it in every episode. So Antonio and Lorena, our music team, did a great job. And even the source music, they had that nostalgic old time music playing in many episodes. So you heard it a lot and you got used to it right away.
Yeah. I love the whole sort of that nostalgic kind of style that they brought to it. I think it's really nice.
Yeah, the music, the color, the look.
Yeah, absolutely. For any sort of sound nerds out there that are listening to this, I should really ask, what sort of tools and software and workflows were essential for you in this? Because you talked a lot about using things to clean up a lot of the audio.
For sound editing, dialogue-wise, a lot of software out there that gets rid of background noise is certainly essential because of the way it was filmed. They were constantly moving. It was the one shot. As I mentioned earlier, the boom operator couldn't record all the dialogue, so we had to really rely on their lavalier mics that were placed on their bodies. But you also get clothing movement. You get a lot of unwanted sounds. A software called Isotope. We used it practically in every scene just to clean up and help save dialogue clarity. Sound effects wise, we went out and recorded a lot of the sounds because, like Like I said, we were based in LA, but there's plenty of great libraries out there that we used as our resources and stuff like that. Our main software was Pro Tools. This was an Atmos mix, so the Dolby Atmos software to help us render the audio for the Apple specifications for their deliveries was crucial, but a lot of it's standard in our business today. Editors already have this software. We just really maxed out our usage of it with the way this was filmed and what we had to do to preserve the dialogue.
Yeah, some of the dialogue cleanup stuff, I've used sort of basic versions of it, particularly the AI kind of cleaning kind of things. It's like witchcraft. So to me, I've done recordings in big Comic Con theaters. I have a recorder at the front and something going on with that. And I've ended up having to use the stuff off the camera. The fact that it just can take all the background noise out and you actually get a sort of usable thing. It's obviously not going to be broadcast quality, but
but what a difference, right?
Yeah. No, the level of some of that stuff is ridiculous at this point.
Yeah, we're spoiled.
Yeah. So, of all the work that you did do on the studio, was there one particular sequence that you're particularly proud of from how it came out from the sound side of things?
The sequence is the entire episode of the Golden Globes episode. I just thought that episode, the way they filmed and shot it, looked exactly like what I've watched on TV for many years. And we had just such a pleasure recreating the sounds of what we hear when we watch the Golden Globes. There's something about that show that it's not quite perfect. You always hear movement when the host is speaking from everybody at their tables and stuff like that. And we took a lot of time to recreate just subtle things that we put into that episode, and it came out great. We were really proud of it.
Yeah, it's such a good episode. That were there any sort of happy accidents in terms of things that you'd recorded and then you'd gone back to the episode and maybe looked at the mix and gone, actually, that worked really well in there, even though we didn't intend it?
A lot of the sounds are recorded on the Warner Brothers lot because I went in there without any permit or anything like that. I just basically stood like a bystander and just was holding my microphone, and golf carts were passing by, which was perfect because you see a lot of that in the series. I didn't ask anybody to record anything for me. I didn't walk into any offices letting them know I was recording, because these days our recorders are all handheld. We could hide them. So a lot of that actually came out really surprisingly well because we got to use it every time they shot on the Warner Brothers lot. I was eventually told to leave because eventually holding my microphones pointing at cars and everybody, and it made a few of the executives a little uncomfortable. Why is he going to lose this?
Yeah.
But I got enough sound that I could use throughout some of the episodes in the series.
Also, yes, suddenly discovered that there's a guy recording and they'd be discussing the latest Superman movie or something.
Exactly, yeah. That person has been sitting there for quite a while. There's something wrong.
Yes, I imagine that's a problem. Speaking of Warner Brothers and that sort of stuff, just moving off the studio slightly, I noticed from your IMDb, you worked on Gotham. Is that the entire run of that? I know it's 97 episodes you're credited with. I don't know whether that's the entire run or certainly in most of it, I would have thought.
Yeah, all but one episode. I did not do the pilot. And then in 2014, they ended up starting post-production and I joined the show and we did another, I think, 99, something like that. Yeah, 98, 99 episodes.
That's such a obviously dramatically different show from something like the studio, and it's stylized on screen and much larger than life. And it's a superhero thing to it.
Yeah.
How different is it working on something like that compared to something like the studio?
The Gotham series was just a ton of work. It was nonstop action. They basically filmed a movie in 44 minutes. Danny Cannon, the supervising director and co-showrunner, it's a kid in a candy store for a show like that. He does not stop. He does not hold back on anything. They told so much story, but not necessarily always scripted. They would write scenes for sounds only and music. So when we came across those type of episodes or sections of episodes, the amount of work, whether it was weapons or in the Batcave as progressing through the 5 seasons that we did, the amount of work was tremendous. And we needed so much time to mix these episodes because it was just massive sound when there wasn't dialogue only. type of thing. So the approach for something like that was we really needed to rely heavily on sound design and sound effects more than doing something for the studio, which was ambience, standard sound effects. And again, comedy, be careful what you play, how loud you play it. Whereas Gotham was, it needs to be louder. Yes, I want this in the surrounds. I want to hear movement. So the environments were different. And because of that, there was still a lot of work for both, but certainly a different approach and different resources needed for both.
Yeah, I think you did such a wonderful job on that show. It was so fun and I really enjoyed it. You've also been involved in a bunch of Taylor Sheridan stuff as well, which, I mean, so that's another thing again with particularly a lot of the historical stuff you've got. Are you working on Landman season 2?
Season 2, yes, correct.
Yes, that's because they just announced, I think that's back in November as well. So you've got that coming up. Are you done on season 2? Because I know sound always gets last.
Yeah, no, we just started about 3 weeks ago. We have the first couple of episodes. They're fantastic. The writing is obviously amazing, and it's going to be a great season. We really enjoyed the first season, and they're picking up right where they left off. So it's going to be a fantastic season too.
Yeah, that's been a great show. Really gone down incredibly well. Mm-hmm. So last couple of questions for you. They're the same for everybody, so they're fairly general. But first question is, what TV shows are you yourself watching at the moment?
At my age, I'm actually watching a lot of old series again. I started Oz on HBO. The Barry Levinson series. That's fantastic. I do like to still watch comedy because when I work on a show like Gotham or Landman, 10 hours a day, my ears are exhausted. So when I come home, I just want to relax and just have a good laugh. So whether it's The Simpsons, something like that, or Platonic, which is another Seth Rogen series. Nice half-hour comedy just to have a good laugh. And at the same time, I'll look for old movies, Martin Scorsese movies and stuff like that, because I'm still a fan of sound. I love sound. I am influenced by many great sound designers out there. I want to watch and learn more and try different approaches. On the weekends, I'll try to get in 1 or 2 movies, even a documentary, just to see what everybody else is doing and see if I could use any techniques or ideas that they did.
Awesome. Yeah. And if you had the opportunity to work on any TV series, can either be something historical from the past, something present day, or some future genre you maybe haven't played around in yet, what would it be?
Oh, gosh. A genre I haven't played around in yet. I miss something like Gotham, which is that comic book vicious storyline to it, just because you could make up so much. You have creative licenses with stuff like that. I'm glad it's still popular. A lot of it's in movie theaters these days. I'm hoping that the TV world makes a reboot of some of these characters or any movies going to TV again. I just really enjoyed the freedom we have or had on that series. One day, I'm sure something like that will come back and I'll jump on the opportunity. I certainly won't turn it down.
Yeah. Now, DC and Marvel are making TV shows to be around this. Sure, something will pop up at some point. Awesome. Thank you for taking the time today. It's been lovely chatting with you. I love the show. I look forward to Landman coming back and the new season of The Studio and all the other stuff as well. Thank you for taking the time.
Excellent. Thank you so much, David. I appreciate it.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Geektown Behind the Scenes podcast. Huge thanks to George for taking the time to share such fantastic stories about the sound of The Studio and his career across TV and film. If you haven't watched it yet, The Studio is streaming now on Apple TV Plus with a second season already confirmed following its record-breaking 23 Emmy nominations. If you enjoyed this interview, don't forget to subscribe, rate and review Geektown Radio on the podcast app of your choice. And for all the latest TV news, interviews, premiere dates and more, you can also head over to geektown.co.uk. By subscribing to the podcast, you can also catch our weekly Geektown Radio episodes where we cover the latest TV news, reviews and all the big premiere info alongside more behind-the-scenes chats. We'll be back soon with another behind-the-scenes look at your favourite TV shows and movies, but for now, see you next time.